1. The Delivery of Dread. On a dark and stormy night in a quiet suburban neighborhood, a young woman named Emily found herself craving a late-night snack. With the rain pouring down outside, she decided to order food delivery from a local restaurant, hoping to satisfy her hunger without braving the elements. As she waited anxiously for her food to arrive, Emily couldn't shake a sense of unease that settled over her. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and casting eerie shadows across the room. But she brushed off her apprehension, attributing it to the stormy weather. Finally, a knock sounded at the door, and Emily hurried to answer it, eager to feast on her long-awaited meal. But when she opened the door, her heart sank. Standing on her doorstep was a delivery guy, his face obscured by the hood of his rain-soaked jacket. His eyes bore into hers with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine, and his smile seemed to stretch unnaturally wide, revealing rows of yellowed teeth. Trying to ignore her growing sense of dread, Emily accepted the food and handed over the payment, but as she turned to close the door, she felt a cold hand close around her wrist, stopping her in her tracks. With a voice that seemed to drip with malice, the delivery guy whispered, "Enjoy your meal, Emily! You'll be seeing me again soon!" Terrified, Emily slammed the door shut and bolted it behind her, her heart racing with fear. She quickly inspected the food, but everything seemed to be in order, so she cautiously began to eat, trying to push the encounter from her mind. But as she took her first bite, she noticed a strange taste, bitter and metallic like copper. Ignoring her instincts, she forced herself to continue eating, desperate to quell the gnawing hunger in her stomach. But as the minutes passed, Emily began to feel a strange sensation creeping over her. Dizziness, nausea, and a sharp pain in her abdomen that grew more intense with each passing moment. Realization dawned on her with horror. Something was terribly wrong with the food. In a panic, Emily stumbled to her phone and dialed for help, but her vision blurred and her hands shook uncontrollably. As she collapsed to the ground, she heard the sound of footsteps approaching, and a voice whispered in her ear, "I told you, Emily, you'll be seeing me again soon." And as darkness closed in around her, Emily realized with a sinking dread that she had fallen victim to the creepy food delivery guy's sinister plan. 2. The Midnight Encounter. In the dead of night, with the moon hidden behind a thick blanket of clouds, Sarah found herself craving a midnight snack. With her stomach growling and the fridge disappointingly empty, she decided to order a meal from a local delivery service, hoping to satisfy her hunger without having to venture out into the darkness. As she placed her order online, Sarah couldn't shake a sense of unease that settled over her. The shadows seemed to dance in the corners of her apartment, and every creak of the floorboard sent a shiver down her spine. But she brushed off her apprehension, chalking it up to her imagination running wild in the silence of the night. Minutes stretched into eternity as Sarah waited anxiously for her food to arrive. Finally, a soft knock sounded at the door and she hurried to answer it, eager to feast on her late-night indulgence. But as she swung open the door, her excitement turned to apprehension. Standing on her doorstep was the delivery guy, his features obscured by the darkness of the night. His eyes gleamed with an unsettling intensity, and his smile seemed to stretch too wide, revealing teeth that glinted in the dim light. Suppressing a shiver, Sarah accepted the food and handed over the payment, trying to ignore the chill that crept down her spine. But as she turned to close the door, she felt a cold hand close around her wrist, stopping her in her tracks. With a voice that sent a shiver down her spine, the delivery guy whispered, "Enjoy your meal, Sarah. You'll be seeing me again soon." Fear clawed at Sarah's heart as she slammed the door shut and bolted it behind her, her mind racing with questions and doubts. But hunger gnawed at her insides, driving her to open the container and take a hesitant bite. At first, the food seemed perfectly ordinary, but as she chewed, a bitter taste filled her mouth and her stomach churned with nausea. panic surged through her veins as she realized something was terribly wrong with the food. Desperate for answers, Sarah tried to call the delivery service, but her phone screen remained blank, the battery drained of life. With trembling hands, she stumbled to her feet, determined to seek help outside. But as she reached for the door, a sudden dizziness overtook her, and she collapsed to the ground, her vision swimming with darkness. And as consciousness slipped away, she heard the sound of footsteps approaching, and a voice whispered in her ear, "I told you, Sarah, you'll be seeing me again soon." And as the world faded to black, Sarah realized with a sinking dread that she had fallen victim to the sinister intentions of the midnight delivery guy, and her fate now lay in his hands. 3. The haunting delivery. As the clock struck midnight, casting shadows across the quiet suburban streets, Mark found himself craving a late-night snack. With his fridge barren and his hunger gnawing at him, he reluctantly decided to order food delivery from a local restaurant. As he placed his order online, a sense of unease settled over him, the darkness outside seeming to press in on all sides. But he brushed off his apprehension, attributing it to the late hour and his overactive imagination. Minutes stretched into eternity as Mark waited anxiously for his food to arrive. Finally, a soft knock sounded at the door, and he hurried to answer it, eager to devour his meal. But as he swung open the door, his excitement turned to dread. Standing on his doorstep was the delivery guy, his features obscured by the shadows of the night. His eyes gleamed with an unnatural light, and his smile seemed to stretch too wide, revealing teeth that glinted in the moonlight. Suppressing a shiver, Mark accepted the food and handed over the payment, his heart pounding with unease. But as he turned to close the door, he felt a cold hand close around his wrist, stopping him in his tracks. With a voice that sent a chill down his spine, the delivery guy whispered, "Enjoy your meal, Mark. You'll be seeing me again soon." Fear clawed at Mark's heart as he slammed the door shut and bolted it behind him, his mind racing with questions and doubts. But hunger drove him to open the container and take a hesitant bite. At first, the food seemed harmless enough, but as he chewed, a bitter taste filled his mouth and his stomach churned with nausea. Panic surged through him as he realized something was terribly wrong with the food. Desperate for answers, Mark tried to call the delivery service, but his phone screen remained blank, the battery inexplicably drained. With trembling hands, he stumbled to his feet, determined to seek help outside. But as he reached for the door, a sudden dizziness overtook him, and he collapsed to the ground, his vision swimming with darkness. And as consciousness slipped away, he heard the sound of footsteps approaching, and a voice whispered in his ear, "I told you, Mark. You'll be seeing me again soon." And as the world faded to black, Mark realized with a sinking dread that he had fallen victim to the haunting intentions of the delivery guy, and his fate now lay in the hands of something far more sinister than he could have ever imagined.